What's up, guys? 1-2 day yesterday. Obviously not what I wanted. South Florida continues to be a nemesis of mine, outperforming the power ratings guys and the analytics and whatever. Kind of crazy. They won that game outright. Never really in doubt, unfortunately. A win in the NBA on the San Antonio Spurs. So that was good. They covered. They didn't win outright, though. And then the NHL play, that game, man. A 5-2 final going against me for the New Jersey Devils. It was 5-1 later in that game. That game statistically was way closer than the score was. The game was almost even statistically, so I don't know what the hell happened in that game. That game looked good for basically every reason you could imagine. Like the situation, I thought, set up very strongly for a play on Pittsburgh. They've kind of been a nemesis of mine, too, not coming through when I play them. The market moved significantly towards the Pittsburgh side as well, dropping almost to the point where Pittsburgh went off a favorite. New Jersey went off such a small favorite in that game. We move on to today. I mean, that sucked. Moving on to today. Oh, and I guess I'll mention the first 4 games finished last night. So congratulations to Wagner, who held on for the win. They had like a 13-point lead in the final 3 minutes of the game and almost lost the entire lead. Howard was able to cut it to 1. So that was a fairly exciting final couple minutes there in that game. Not really expectedly, because it looked like Wagner was just going to put it away. Got all the way down, basically went down to the wire, which was crazy. Howard wound up having to foul. Wagner hit 2 free throws to push the lead back to 3. Then Howard had a final possession where they got multiple offensive rebounds, and I think they were able to attempt at least 3 3-pointers on that possession, and they weren't able to make one, and the game ended. Crazy, pretty crazy stuff. A lot crazier than the other game where Virginia just basically proved that they probably should not have even made the field. They could be playing in the NIT right now, man. And it's like, look at what the committee took from you. We could have had Indiana State with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in that game last night, and instead we get a Virginia team that can't score at all. And I mean, I'm fine with defense. I like defense. I like to pick teams that have a good defense, but that Virginia team, that offense is just really pitiful. And I think it would have been more beneficial to everybody that they were not in that game, because they got completely embarrassed. That's an embarrassing performance from them. It was embarrassing to watch. It was not good entertainment. I mean, what do you want, really? I don't watch that much of that game, but it was just bad. Colorado State, congratulations to them. They move on. They will be facing Texas tomorrow night, I believe, tomorrow at some point. But really just awful, awful stuff, ridiculous stuff. Virginia only scoring in the 40s, which is not really that's not really something new for them either. But a Tony Bennett team, you kind of expect better out of them, and you kind of expect worse out of a Mountain West team in the tournament, really. The Mountain West has a really bad recent track record in tournament history, which might also give you a little bit of indication of what I have going on in my bracket. I don't have many Mountain West teams going that far in my bracket. We could say that. Oh, boy. I think New Mexico might be the one team that's set up to actually potentially do all right, but we'll see. Moving on to today, and I will mention that in tomorrow's games, I do already have a play on Texas Tech, just to throw that out there. I'll probably explain it tomorrow. Well, I said that yesterday about my play against Villanova tonight, and I explained the whole thing anyway, but I won't go into detail on the Texas Tech one until tomorrow. But I do like laying the points with Texas Tech tomorrow, and you might be able to figure out why without me explaining it in the first round of the actual tournament. I will explain why tomorrow, but you can lay 4.5 or 5 on them right now. I think it's actually gone down from 5.5, which is kind of strange because I do like the Texas Tech side. Moving on to today, I got 2 plays. I'm skipping the NHL. There are only 3 games in the NHL, and I just don't see any angles that interest me there, really. So we won't do anything with that. We got, of course, we have college basketball. We have the other games in the first 4 going on with Grambling, the winners of the SWAC, against Montana State, who are only a 500 team after winning the Big Sky Conference. There were multiple games below 500 going into that conference. Were able to win it for the 3rd straight year, even though they've had a lot of turnover on that team. So the better Montana State teams that we saw get into the tournament the last 2 years are not the same as this team. This Montana State line, I mean, I would expect Montana State to win this game because they're the better team, but I mean, I said that about Howard, and that didn't happen last night. Colorado State obviously was the better team and the favorite, and they won as the favorite, although I didn't expect it to be anywhere near that embarrassing for Virginia. I expected it to be closer, especially with how bad Mountain West teams do in the tournament. Montana State is the better team against Grambling and from the better conference. So they've gone down from -4.5 to -4. 70% of the tickets on them, only 56% of the cash. So there is some line movement. There are market indicators on taking the points with Grambling. We'll see what happens there, man, because I don't like the SWAC in general. I think they're a bad conference, but the Northeastern Conference is bad, and they won last night, although the MEAC is also a bad conference, which is Howard's conference. The Big Sky, I think, is the best out of the four conferences that are having teams play in the first four here. So we'll see what happens. The winner of Grambling and Montana, I believe, moves on to play Purdue on Friday. So we'll see what happens with that. But the market indicators are on taking the points with Grambling. I'm not going to get involved in this. I'm not going to get involved in either of these games. Where we have another Mountain West team in Boise State going up against Colorado. Colorado's up from 2 to 2.5 with juice going through the 2.5. So market movement and indicators on Colorado. 75% of the tickets on them, 86% of the cash. So they're also public, but it does look like they have the respected money kind of going in their direction too. I do lean to Colorado in this one. I expect them to win the game. And I would kind of lean to them to cover the small number as well. I mean, when you think they're going to win, you probably think they're going to cover a 2-point spread as well, or 2.5, I guess, or whatever. But I mean, you got another Mountain West team here. I don't trust the Mountain West when it comes to the tournament for the most part. And I think Colorado's just the better team. I think they're the more balanced team out of these two power ratings wise. If you look at KenPom, I think he has Colorado actually like in the top like 30 teams in college basketball, and he has Boise, I think, a bit outside of that. I haven't looked recently at the recent updates, but I believe that is the case. So I tend to lean a little bit in the Colorado direction there. In the NIT, and unfortunately I was on the wrong NIT game yesterday, I was right with my like first instinct that Ohio State might be like kind of a team to fade in the first round. They almost lost outright, but I really just didn't see them being like a totally disappointed team just because they came from out of nowhere. Like they were having such a bad season for most of the season, even though they're a program that kind of expects to do better. This season, I don't think they really had high expectations, and they just really went on a roll with their new coach. So we'll see what Ohio State can do in this tournament because they did survive. The game that I'm on, as I mentioned yesterday, is a fade of Villanova. I mean, they are the public team, but it does look like they have the majority of the cash on them right now, which I don't like. The line's gone down. Or excuse me, it's on VCU. I'm fading Villanova, excuse me. Villanova's gone down from 7 to 6.5. They have 52% of tickets, it looks like right now, but 81% of the cash. I don't know about that, but Villanova, I mean, you'd think they would get the public money just because they're the bigger name team, but they have looked really ugly this year as well. Both of these teams play a pretty ugly brand of basketball. I don't know if they're going to continue to have the cash discrepancy like this. I kind of hope not, but it does look like the line opened at 7. I was able to get +7 on VCU, and it moved down to 6. Looks like it is kind of maybe headed back up, though, so maybe you could get VCU +7 again. There's a lot that I like about this. This is kind of that, like, perennial, like, there's always at least one team in the NIT where they're a big conference team playing a team from a bit of a smaller conference, and that big conference team had higher aspirations and is a team that's like always in the tournament, even though they weren't last year. But that team is Villanova. I mean, they're a big name team, name program in college basketball, a blue blood, if you will. They won 2 NCAA titles in not that long ago, 2016 and 2018, I believe. And I had one of those 2 right in my brackets. I think I had the 2018 champion right there. So yay. But they're a team that expects like to be in the tournament, man. And this year, I think they expected to be there as well. And look at how they ended the season. Even though they had an ugly record, their metrics are pretty good. They were talked about as a bubble team from like most of the like late stretch of the season there. Kind of all came down to what they would do in the Big East tournament. They were talked about as potentially getting into the tournament. Then we had multiple bid steals from other conferences while Villanova was playing in the Big East tournament. And what happened in the Big East tournament? They almost lost to DePaul, which looked awful. So then I took Villanova in the next game because I thought that was going to be a wake-up call. And I think I should have had the game right, as I lamented after the game happened, the Villanova-Marquette game. Villanova somehow winds up not covering that game, even though they controlled the pace, played a slow-paced game in that game, were able to play defense, keep Marquette down, and Marquette was given the buzzer beater shot, so it was a 2-point win by Marquette. except they reversed the call. It went into overtime, and then Villanova wound up not even covering the plus 4.5. That's just brutal. When you even were looking at basically what was the final score temporarily, and Villanova had covered the number in that game. That's just brutal, man. And that's a brutal way to exit the season for Villanova. They almost beat Marquette. They played a good game against Marquette, a tough game, and that's the last game that they played. I don't want anything to do with this Villanova team, and that's the last game that they played. And they're a team that expects to be in the tournament every year. Now they're in the NIT, which they did accept the bid into the NIT. A lot of teams that you think might be the most disappointed didn't even accept the bid. So maybe that says that, yeah, they want to be here. Do they, though? Do the players want to be here? I'm not entirely sure about that. But that's a tough loss to bounce back from, man. They almost beat Marquette, which would have been a big win. It would have helped their resume. And then they would have moved on to the Big East semifinals where they would have had a winnable game. I think it would have been against Providence. Villanova would have been a favorite in that game against Providence without Bryce Hopkins. Villanova, if they had beaten Marquette, you might have seen Villanova in the Big East final against UConn, where it's kind of like maybe anything could even happen there because Villanova played a 1-point game against UConn during the regular season. So who knows? So they were that close to potentially making a deeper run into that Big East tournament and maybe getting into this actual tournament. Now they might be looking last night and seeing Virginia was so bad last night. Maybe Villanova should have been in instead of Virginia. They're one of the teams that I think would have at least put up a better performance, even though Villanova plays a similar style because they're a good defensive team and they play ugly offensively, but still not as trash as Virginia. Their power rated much better, but coming into this game, because they're so disappointed and because of the way that their Big East tournament ended that way, and that's just a complete heartbreaker. So I don't know how they're going to be able to just flip a switch and turn it on here, even though you might be able to because you have some days off now, and it is kind of a new – they're in a new tournament. They're in the NIT now, so it is kind of a chance to push a reset button. But will they? I don't know. And they're facing a smaller conference team. VCU – I don't think they're going to be as disappointed, even though, yeah, they made the Atlantic 10 final. And at that point, they were expected to win it because they were the favorite, although only by a couple points in the Atlantic 10 final. But before they made it there, they did not expect to make the tournament, man. Even though they've been a decent program, they made the tournament a few times. They did make it last year. So, yeah, maybe you could say their season aspirations were to win the A10 and get into the tournament, but they're not like a blue blood like Villanova. That's just a bigger conference team that's just constantly getting into the tournament with at-large bids and stuff. That's not VCU, so I don't think they're going to be as disappointed a team. And they get to face a blue blood like Villanova, so that tends to motivate a team from a smaller conference. Even though it is the NIT, they get to say, hey, we get to prove ourselves against one of the better programs in college basketball. I think VCU will be up for the game. That tends to be the case with these NIT matchups that are like this. This is the one that I see in the entire NIT that has this aspect to it. And the other thing that puts it over the top for me is that both of these teams play good defense and they play a slow pace, especially Villanova. Good defense and slow pace are certainly the case for Villanova. And that's not really what you want when you have a team laying a big amount of points. Basically, it means points are going to be harder to come by. The total's a bit low here, although it's gone up a little bit, I guess, to 131.5, but not a high total for obvious reasons. And in a game where points are a bit harder to come by, taking the points has more value. Typically, you get more value out of each point that you're taking. So you could see this game being a close, lower scoring defensive game where both teams want to play slow. Both teams want to play defense and grind. So we'll see what happens here, but I'm taking the points +7 with VCU for all those reasons. And then moving to the NBA real quickly. Not a lot that I like on the NBA card. And I said that I thought the play that I had last night didn't feel that strong. This one doesn't feel that strong either, but I'm doing it anyway, and we'll see what happens. And that's going to be to take the points with the Philadelphia 76ers. Suns are up from 8 to 8.5. Still going to grab it, though. Motivationally, if you just look at the stretch run here in the NBA, both of these teams are fighting to get into the playoffs and to kind of avoid the play-in scenario. I hate the play-in scenario. The NBA, just go back to the 8-team thing where that was crazy enough where you have 8 teams for each conference getting in. So you have 16 out of I think there are 30 NBA teams, 16 of them make the tournament. Now 20 make the playoffs. Now 20 out of the 30 make the playoffs. It's just so ridiculous. So the 76ers and the Suns are both currently in a position where they would be, I believe they would be in the play-in games. But the Suns, the Suns, I believe, are a little bit higher than that, or are they actually out of the play-in right now? I don't even remember, but these teams are both like fighting to avoid the play-in. I think there's no question both these teams are going to make the playoffs because so many teams make the playoffs. But you want to avoid those play-in games if you can and not have to play an extra like single game elimination thing. So you get to go right into the playoffs and play an actual series where you get to perform over a longer period of time. Those playing games are kind of brutal and can eliminate everybody if you have one off night. So you do want to avoid those. Both these teams are trying to avoid those right now. So I think that aspect of it is a wash because both teams will want to win in that regard. But you do have the Suns here being very public with 94% of the cash and tickets. People do not believe in the 76ers anymore, of course, because the 76ers have not been the same team whatsoever without Joel Embiid. Sure, that's true. But they're still a competitive team, and especially with Maxey back, they haven't been as bad. I mean, without Embiid, of course, they do struggle a bit without him for sure. But, I mean, they've been playing decent basketball recently. They did just beat the Heat in their most recent games. So does that mean they're going to suffer a letdown? I don't think so, because even though that's a big win against the Heat, like I said, they're still going to be motivated because they're trying to get into the playoffs and avoid the play-in playoff scenario. And they're starting a road trip here. So even though it's only with one day off, when you start a road trip, you tend to be focused as well. So those wins you had on the road might just be used as kind of like a stepping stool, like kind of momentum to take you out onto the road trip. So I don't think they're going to be in a letdown. They beat Charlotte the game before that. Not a big deal, although it was a return home spot where you might think they might have been distracted a little bit, especially with a Miami team up next, but they were able to get it done against Charlotte. I actually don't know if they covered because they were probably big favorites. It looks like they covered by 1 point on the closer there, so close to 10.5, winning by 11. They beat Miami. Now they're going out on the road. This is a situation that I like, man, in most sports, even though it didn't work out in the hockey game last night. A team starting a road trip against a team returning from a road trip. You usually want to be on that team starting a road trip because they tend to have focus because they want to start the road trip on the right note. And of course, they're not going to overlook a pretty good Phoenix team who has a better record than Philadelphia does. So I think Philadelphia is going to bring focus here. Starting the road trip, whereas Phoenix, I think it's a little bit more questionable for them. I mean, maybe they'll even let up a little bit just because they know that Philadelphia hasn't been playing as well without Joel Embiid. So that's one aspect to it. And they know they're a pretty big favorite against this beat-up Philadelphia team. They beat Philadelphia the only time they played them this year, and that was early in the season, I believe, when Embiid was still playing, of course, very early in the season. That was in Philadelphia. So I don't know if that's really going to have much of an effect because it was quite a while ago. But Phoenix, even though they're coming off a loss by double digits at Milwaukee, that's a good Milwaukee team. They're returning from a road trip where they went 2-2. They beat Cleveland. Pretty good win there, although I don't know if Cleveland had Donovan Mitchell back for that game or not. They lost to Boston. You can't really blame them for that. Beat Charlotte as they should have. So both of these teams beat Charlotte recently by the exact same amount, 11. And then they lost at Milwaukee. Again, you can't necessarily blame them for that either. Milwaukee Bucks, pretty good team. Boston, an even better team, of course. So those two losses, what are you going to do? You lost to better teams. Now they're returning home. And yeah, even though they do have an extra day off, 2 days off, the return home tends to be a distracted spot, man. And even though they are fighting for a playoff spot, I think they know they're fighting to avoid the play-in. But I think they also look at what they have up next, and they know that they have Atlanta and 2 games against San Antonio coming up. So they know those are probably easier games. Those are going to be winnable games probably. Like they should be able to win the majority of those games. Although after that, yes, it's true, they have a pretty brutal schedule from then on out, so that sucks for them. So I don't know if they're going to be taking all of that into account and actually like really show up focus in this one, but it's tough to show up focus when you have a return home from a road trip, man. And for Phoenix, it's a road trip that took them out to the East Coast, multiple time zones shifting here, and you always get that like distraction of family life coming back in when you return home. You have to deal with that, even though they do have an extra day off, and they are playing a team that is a decent team that is likely going to get into the playoffs in some capacity. Still, I think the game is a little bit more important to Philadelphia because I think they're in the worst playoff position here, playoff spot, even though Phoenix does have a brutal schedule for a lot of the what's left of the season. Philadelphia, they're struggling, man, without Embiid. So I think every game matters a little bit more to them if they want to still try to get into the playoffs here and not only just avoid the play-ins, but make the playoffs. So it looks pretty certain that both of these teams are pretty secure in their playoff spot because they do have a decent size lead, a decent size margin in the standings over some of the teams that are below them that are still likely to get into the playing game. So I don't think that's that much of a concern at this point for these teams, but still. Phoenix, yeah, returning over from the road trip, it's always a difficult spot to return home, especially when they got pretty up for their prior game, even though it was a game where they lost by double digits. You look at that game, they didn't really go away, man. They hung around and they kind of kept within like a decent margin. The game was in single digits pretty late in the game. They were down 8 pretty late in the game into the halfway through the fourth quarter. It was, a game you get up for emotionally because it's a game against a pretty good Bucks team. Bucks weren't favored by that much, really. And Phoenix, as I mentioned, like their depth is a little bit in question, too. So when they have tough, like, rest and travel spots like this, it tends to be a little bit difficult for them. So we'll see what happens here. So I like it. It does look like, I mean, they're such the public team. I kind of expect the cash discrepancy to wind up going against them a little bit. We'll see what happens here. So the only 2 plays that I have today are on these 2 decent-sized underdogs here. College basketball, Virginia Commonwealth +7. Both these games kind of late at night. And Philadelphia 76ers +9. I was able to get on that one. Let's get back on track, man. Have a good day. Let's do it.